Hey there. Welcome to The Climate Cycle, a podcast focused on Canada's climate tech ecosystem. In each episode, we sit down with founders building climate solutions right here in Canada to better understand the challenges presented by climate change and what we can do about it. In today's episode, we sit down with Roya Aghighi and Sarah Graham, co-founders of Lite-1. Lite-1 is producing sustainable dyes from microorganisms by leveraging the natural functions of bacteria to produce sustainable, low-impact colorants that can be used in apparel and many other industries. Dyes are easy to overlook, even though they're right in front of us. But conventional versions are made from fossil fuels and contribute to water pollution, human health risk, and climate change. Lite-1 is aiming to take over these synthetic colorants with their bio-based circular alternatives. In my conversation with Roya and Sarah, we unpack the world of biomanufacturing and precision fermentation. We talk about the social and environmental impact of conventional products and the shift that they're seeing towards sustainable solutions like Lite-1 from partners in fashion and apparel. They also share their experiences building a hardtech company in Canada and how we can build a more supportive ecosystem for hardtech and climate tech. Let's get into it. Roya and Sarah, thanks for joining me.
Hi, it's really great to be here. I'm very excited to share our journey with everybody.
Thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. So to kick us off, could you tell us what Lite-1 does and the problem that it's solving?
Yes, for sure. I'm going to zoom out a little bit to give everybody a broad view of what the issue with the color industry is. Sarah and I bring an extensive amount of experience from diverse research backgrounds and our past lives in the fashion industry. Through our journey, we have witnessed firsthand the environmental toll that our desires for beauty create. We all love beauty and we coexist with it. But at the same time, it shouldn't really come at an expense for our planet. So take the fashion industry, for instance. Every year, a staggering 800,000 tons of colorants are used, of which over 200,000 tons end up in waterways and get lost. It's a shocking statistic that urgently demands our attention. Relying on our backgrounds in biodesign, working with biology systems for years, we knew there must be better ways to tackle this issue or operate within these systems. Nature has been mastering sustainable systems before we even existed on this planet, with microorganisms actually leading this charge. So the big question for us was, why not take a page from microorganisms playbook? There is a huge potential to revolutionize colorations and dyeing processes by learning from nature's genius. I need to emphasize that for us, it wasn't just about finding a solution. Working in the industry, we were really fed up with greenwashing that was happening. We wanted to tackle this complex problem head on without compromising on performance, cost, or scalability that are often demanded and needed by the industry. Our mission is to ensure our solution isn't just another niche band-aid fix, but a game changer that sets a new standard for sustainability and innovation in the industry. Lite-1 is leveraging functions of microorganisms to introduce 100% sustainable colorants grown from microorganisms in a circular system that meet industry's needs from all aspects of color variety, performance, cost, and yet is 100% sustainable.
Fantastic. Cool. Thanks for zooming out and kind of providing that broader context. How did you two first become interested in this problem and kind of aware of this and get motivated enough to start a company around this?
Yeah, so my journey here was really non-linear. I never felt like I could fit into the boxes of the careers that were presented to me as a young person. And I was really pulled between the sciences and the arts. And they were always kind of presented as two separate disciplines that had no crossover or were like opposites that I had to choose between. And I always wanted to be a fashion designer, but I was pushed more into the sciences. And then after one semester in a Bachelor of Kinesiology, I decided, no way, this isn't for me. And then I switched into the Bachelor of Design and Fashion Design. It wasn't until I entered the fashion industry and worked as a designer that I was confronted with the impact of fashion that this industry has on the planet and the people that are working within it. And much of this impact comes from the materials that we choose to use. So this led me to dive deep into material innovation, and I focused on bringing new sustainable materials into the brands that I was working for. But then I got so interested in that I wanted to be on the other side and being the one who was driving these new innovations instead of implementing others' ideas. So that's when I decided to get a master's in material futures, which was at Central St. Martin's in the UK. And there I was introduced to biodesign, which is kind of a thriving community and industry there that you don't see a lot here in Canada. I was able to learn all of the incredible things that designing with living systems could offer in terms of sustainability and novel materials. So here I could mesh that science and the arts, not as opposites, but as complementary areas. And I was able to build this multidisciplinary mindset into one of my biggest strengths. So working there as a designer, I talked my way into some incredible microbiology labs across the UK and Canada, learning science by practice, but always with a focus on microbial materials. Since then, I've just been hooked on bacteria and all of these incredible things that they can do. And then meeting Roya and hearing her similar journey of discovery with biodesign, we knew that we had to come together and pioneer a company like this in Canada. And the color industry was a perfect place to focus because we both have a deep understanding of how detrimental this industry is from our experience within fashion. And we've also seen all of these incredible colors that microorganisms can create. Some of them were from even like contaminations on samples that we were working in. Or if you think about like the pink scum or black molds that you sometimes find in damp areas of your house, like these are all beautiful colors that these microbes are producing. These colorful bacteria are all around us. So we knew we could work with them to create real change. So that's how we kind of came together on this project, which is now an incredible company.
Cool. And for people like myself who maybe don't know, like what is biodesign and what does that kind of encompass?
We could probably both give our own opinions, but really biodesign is merging the sciences with the design. So you're learning from the living systems of biology, and that could mean like whole ecosystems, or it could mean like small parts of a single cell. Like you're understanding how that works, and you're not just taking inspiration from it, but you're actually integrating that into the design that you're doing. And that will allow you to really bring innovation and focus on sustainability.
For me, it's a true collaboration between different species, different living systems, and us. So yes, learning from it and learning a way to leverage that within our day-to-day systems, but also treating them as as a member of your team, being open-minded to learn and get inspired from all those unexpected little facts that they bring to the day-to-day life, because science is all about very black and white type of facts and rules, but as designers we learn to be open-minded to what could even go wrong and learn something from it and bring that to the utmost part of the opportunity and possibility to make something really unique out of it. I like to treat these microorganisms as our team members and constantly let ourselves to get surprised by what they bring to the table. And it's that moment that the real magic happens.
Very cool. A very different mindset, like overall just way of approaching the problem area or the area in general than kind of the traditional ways of creating solutions. So that's super interesting. Could we talk maybe a little bit about the problem in some more detail? So I know that in a general sense, dyes are produced from fossil fuels, and I know there's some water waste involved. But could you speak to maybe the scale of the problem and kind of what you've seen that says that this is an important problem for climate?
Yeah, for sure. So when we think of the dyes or dye processes, we just think about when they are being consumed in the dyeing systems or coloration processes. But these colorants essentially are plastic because they're made from non-renewable toxic resources such as petroleum. So let's go back. Let's go to step one, when oil is being mined from earth to create obviously so many different things, including colorants, all the way to those purification processes. And then fast forward to the point that the colorants are made, they find themselves into different manufacturing systems for colorations or dyeing processes. And to the point that when we as consumers start using our materials, or every time that we wash our clothing, within those microfibers that gets released into the waterways, so we're also releasing these synthetic plastic, essentially colorants, into the ecosystem as well. And fast forward to the moment that these clothing, as we all know, end up in the landfill. A very, very tiny amount of these colorants are recyclable from our clothing. Let's not talk about that, because that needs a whole new episode of a podcast about recycling clothing. But in this context, when they end up in a landfill, even if the fibers are natural, and just being optimistic here, and if the fibers get decomposed into nature, but the colorants that are toxic and synthetic don't. So then the impact of colors and dyes is just a lot bigger than what we can even imagine. We just don't think about it, just because we don't really see any of these processes or these color molecules in front of our eyes. It's apparently not our problem.
And not only that, but also if you think about the people who work in these mills and dye houses that are interacting with these chemicals every day, you see a lot of respiratory illnesses, cancers, skin diseases. And so that's another aspect to this, is how the people interact with them, and how impactful that is on their lives, who are actually making our clothes and working with these dyes.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, recently there's been a lot of research showing that there are rare type of diseases caused for citizens around these facilities and dye houses, just because these toxic chemicals end up in their drinking water. And it's just, yeah, it's very, very heartbreaking to know that just because we love colors and they're a very essential part of our lives, we're causing all these multiple levels of issues that go so, so deep. It's hard to even just like bring our head around it.
For sure. I think I was, aware of more on the materials side, natural fibers, and, avoiding polyester and plastics and things like that, and really had never considered dye. I'd love to maybe talk a little bit about how this works in the lab and how these dyes and microbes are actually being produced. I have zero background in chemistry or science. I'm kind of picturing, a big steel vat somewhere, like a beer brewery.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite close. So our technology is driven by bacteria, who are amazing microscopic collaborators. And so many bacteria naturally produce color compounds, and these have functions for them other than just looking beautiful. Some of the color compounds are UV protective to shelter them from the elements. Many of them have antimicrobial properties, so this allows them to protect themselves from other microorganisms. But we repurpose these color compounds into high performance and highly sustainable colorants for industries, including textiles, cosmetics, paints, food. Basically, anywhere that you see color, these microbial colorants have the potential to be used. So we take this natural process and we give it a little boost using genetics and biomanufacturing to turn it into an industrial process to make our colorants. And like you mentioned, very simply, our biomanufacturing looks similar to brewing beer. So we use large bioreactor tanks that hold a liquid food for the bacteria, and we source this food from industrial waste streams to make it as circular as possible. And then we control the temperature and the airflow inside the bioreactors. So we're creating this perfect environment for them to thrive and produce the high quality color that we use. Then we separate the color liquid from the bacterial biomass, purify it, dehydrate it into an intense color powder. And then our chemistry team takes this raw color and transforms it into the various products that we have for the range of materials that we're using. We're currently scaling, so we have both lab and pilot scales going on, and then we intend to take over, a lot of the organic and synthetic colorants to make the most impact once we are fully scaled. So taking that industry that's fueled by petroleum, replacing it with organic-based circular one, that's where we're headed here.
Very cool. And you mentioned bioreactors. Can you
Mhm.
speak a little bit to what that
Yeah.
is? I was reading something recently that advancements in bioreactor tech are really unlocking some new things in this area. Maybe you could just kind of talk
Mhm.
about bioreactors and what that's doing for the broader industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, bioreactor is quite a fancy word for just a container that facilitates the growth. But there are different kinds of bioreactors. So, the ones that we're using are called precision fermentation bioreactors. So, they have a lot of different controls in them, temperature and aeration being one, but so many different things that if you look at it, it's like really cool to look at all of these tubes going in and out and all of this control you have. So you're basically just trying to make the most hospitable place for whatever it is that you're growing. It could be fungi, it could be bacteria inside this bioreactor, it could be even algae. So we're using precision fermentation and we do in batches. But there is really cool innovation that's coming in continuous. So you could possibly have a continuous growth of these bacteria that are constantly being fed more food. Your product is being taken out. Any cells that need to they've finished, they're ready to get out of there. So there's room for more to grow, and you just continue and continue to grow these bacteria in your product. So that's something we're really excited about in the future, is being able to integrate that into our process. But right now, a lot of that innovation is at the earlier stages because it brings with it a lot of complications in terms of contamination or strain mutations that keep going. So that's one innovation that's really exciting coming up in the bioreactors that could really facilitate this being even better than it is. But really what it's doing is allowing us to create these products in the way of biomanufacturing. So similar to how we're using our bacteria for color, you can use these bacteria or different microorganisms to produce a huge range of products a lot more sustainably. So circularly and very quickly. If you compare, you can do some food products, comparing that to growing naturally, which would take months, sometimes years, you can do that in a few days. So it's really unlocking a whole new way of manufacturing that's a lot faster. It is more sustainable. And there's areas of innovation that are really exciting there.
Yeah, if anybody asks me what I'm really excited about in technology development and enhancements, that's my number one advancement in biomanufacturing technologies, because I believe the future of manufacturing is growing everything that is around us. So we can essentially get to a point that we can grow all the materials, objects, everything that we really need to consume and depend on. Yeah, it's super exciting.
Yeah, thanks for shedding light on that. It's almost interesting, kind of, we went from way back, everything was natural, then a lot became synthetic, and kind of this return to more biologically produced products.
And fermentation, if you think about it, is a technology that humans have been doing and, working with microorganisms for thousands and thousands of years. I even read Egyptians sometimes would put moldy bread onto wounds as medicine. And I mean, that's penicillin now that we have, or, different cheeses and different wines that are like tens of thousands of years old. So it's not even that new for us to be using them in this way. It's just like expanding that beyond what we knew of before into kind of anywhere that you need to produce a product, now looking at how it can be grown instead of fabricated.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned you have kind of lab scale and pilot scale. What does adoption and growth look like right now for Lite-1's dyes?
I'm glad you asked that. I believe no solution, regardless of how groundbreaking they may be, are capable to make that very much needed meaningful impact alone on their own. So we can see a fundamental transformation when all stakeholders from industry, innovation, governments, consumers, and many more come together to really and truly collaborate. The first step for this is to recognize the issue by the industry players. Then it's obviously enforced in many different ways, such as consumer demands, especially now the new generations are being so amazingly well aware of the issues. And then government regulations and many more. In our case, we are seeing a powerful wave taking place in the industry We are getting significant demand and traction from industry players that are now ready to take actions and recognize the dark side of coloration systems that they've been doing all along. Like any other innovative startup, creating a market segment in the industry, the road to commercialization starts from lab bench validations, multiple testings, scale up our production, validating industry facilities, commercialization or commercial production to launch to market. Currently, we are in the scale-up mode, as Sarah mentioned before, validating and improving our solution in our valuable partners' industry facilities. And we are preparing for our market launch, which is coming very soon and super exciting for us. Obviously, we are starting with fashion industry, but already have been validating our idea and solutions in other market sectors too.
That's exciting stuff. So much I want to jump on there. I would imagine for many potential customers, particularly in apparel, they're looking for ways to reduce their footprint, have a better, brand image, and Lite-1 seems like a perfect fit, but it's probably, I would imagine, a big hurdle for them to change up their supply chains, the way that they've always been doing things. How is Lite-1 kind of integrating into those existing supply chains, maybe compared to, traditional dyes on cost, or maybe there's other considerations for some of these pilot customers?
For us, because we have seen the other side of the game, both Sarah and I come from industry, and we are ex-fashion industry experts. We've seen exactly what happens and what those adaptations they need to be in order for an innovative solution like ours to get picked up. For us, it was our number one rule to make sure what we are offering is exactly applicable to existing systems of the industry. So it doesn't propose a high risk in terms of having to change their systems or the way how they have been processing or doing what they've been doing the best for years right now. So it's really important for innovations to make sure that their solutions are dropped into the existing systems of the industry. Obviously, there will be always a lot of room for innovation, and taking that even up a notch to slowly and gradually change the systems to become more efficient and less wasteful in so many different aspects. But the first step is to make sure that what we offer collectively can be adapted right now and then, just frankly, because there is no more time to waste. On the subject of cost, also, any innovation that comes out, especially in what we are offering in biomanufacturing, it starts with not necessarily being the cheapest option, but it can get there. So it goes back to what I was talking about earlier about a collaborative approach. It needs a little bit more patience from industry partners and consumers to help all these innovations like Lite-1 to scale and offer it at a cost that they are more comfortable in paying. But in general, we also really truly believe that in order to make that impact to the extent of what it's needed, we all need to offer it at a cost so everybody in the industry can afford it to be able to substitute their colorants to a sustainable one. Otherwise, it becomes another niche and just only luxury brands owning it. Any B2B solution may be able to relate to what I'm going to say right now. The supply chains in manufacturing systems are complex. It's never like a linear A results in B type of approach. A majority of part of it at the very beginning starts from brands putting those enforcements in place for a systematic change towards sustainability and towards cleaner products, and accepting and absorbing some of the maybe premium costs at the very beginning until they actually scale and are able to offer that at a very affordable cost to everybody. But something that's been really exciting and intriguing, if I can say, that we've been witnessing is that the manufacturers themselves are also putting a lot of sustainability mandates in place to change a majority part of their supply chain as well. That part is very, very exciting because before it's been mostly the brands holding the face of innovation or face of sustainability. But right now we are actually seeing it going a lot deeper than that.
And from the product development side on that, it's like we're establishing these partnerships with manufacturers as well, not only brands. So we're early with being able to understand how they work with products in their systems and what we can create that's actually going to work with that, and not coming, to them after saying, hey, we have this color, the brand said they want it, can we try it in your system? But starting right from the beginning and understanding that and how we can actually make that product that sort of plug and play product that we're saying that it's going to be.
Very cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like a much more collaborative and kind of integrated approach where ideally the manufacturer and the brands kind of working a little bit more in lockstep there. This kind of goes back to something you said at the beginning, Roya, around the environmental impacts of dyes are, particularly for Western consumers, so far out of sight and mind. What's your thoughts on how more sustainable dyes, like what's the pathway to greater adoption? I know it's like if we had the answer, that everything would be a lot simpler, but kind of curious, what your thoughts are on a pathway to more widespread adoption.
That's my favorite kind of question. This is a question that people often ask me ever since I started my journey in biodesign and working with microorganisms. My answer is never going to be thinking about any of these problems with the mindset of a solution fits all. It has to be a collective approach of educating the consumers, governments enforcing a lot more mandates and rules in place, and industry partners, either from manufacturing sides or the brands introducing these solutions to the consumers, also taking actions and being willing to absorb some of these risks alongside the way. So it's definitely a collective approach, but I always encourage everybody to start from themselves. Just every single time that you're trying to make a decision in your consumption behavior, just pause for 5 seconds of your precious life and really ask yourself, is this something that I really need? And if so, what are the consequences of just consuming this over the next year or so? I feel like just starting from there, a lot of these bigger questions are going to slowly start to be answered by us educating ourselves, taking that responsibility and accountability. So yeah, it's a mix of all.
And I think it's also like one thing that Roy and I are both passionate about and have done a lot of work on prior to this company is like education around science and around the kinds of projects and works that we're doing. Because if you didn't know that bacteria create colors that could make sustainable dyes, then you wouldn't, we would never have come up with this whole company. There's so many things that you can continuously learn and better understand about science and how we can work with nature that can open your mind to there being other ways of doing things than how it is done now. I think that that's something we're trying to integrate into our company, is to be the leaders in pushing that forward and getting people really excited about what microbes can do and what biodesign can do. And that will already facilitate those like deeper thoughts and understandings of how we and nature can work together, which then once you want to find those cool pieces that are dyed by bacteria or grown by bacteria, which will drive that consumer to those pieces as well.
One concept that I learned early on that was a game changing in how I really thought about innovation, solutions, and everything that we do was the concept of caring with versus caring for. The concept of caring for is tangibly seen in all these Band-Aid solutions that we offer to a very small, not a small, but a big problem, but very small angle of a very big problem. Sort of like just touching things on the surface, offering a solution to a big problem and thinking that, perfect, my mission is done now. Now I can move on, and never even think back or look back or just really analyze to see, did it really fix that issue? If yes, how was it successful? Or no, it didn't solve that issue. What went wrong? So the concept of caring with talks about constantly looking back and constantly thinking about the consequences of what we brought to the world or what we are introducing to the world at every single stage of its lifestyle and at every single stage of our day-to-day life with changing trends, changing consumer behaviors, and human psychology. So yeah, I encourage everybody to just like get acquainted with the concept of caring with versus caring for, because if we apply that to every single step of our lives, then it's like a fundamental behavior change for making a meaningful transformation in the whole, like everything that all these issues and problems that we are facing.
I love that. Yeah, it's a hard thing to shift into different ways of thinking. There's so much that kind of pushes towards just the dominant ways of thinking in the culture. This is maybe we've already covered this in what both of you just said, but are there things that when you're talking with partners, whether they're potential customers, investors, other partners that you're working with, are there things that you see that they tend to get wrong about this space in particular, whether it's micro-based dyes or just kind of biodesign in general?
Oh my
Okay.
God. Yeah. Can we set up a new episode for this? Because this is well needed and there are plenty different things. I think the concept of biodesign itself is always misunderstood. That's really important, that investors and even industry people tend to go back to known traditional ways of operating, which is traditional degrees or traditional business models and things like that, that if you're truly talking about innovation, it necessarily shouldn't need to fit into any of those boxed categories, but sadly it often does. And for us, pioneering the field of biodesign in Canada and focusing on a unique non-therapeutic biotech platform has been certainly very challenging. Sarah and I have mainly done our research back in Europe, and once we came back and started doing it here, we felt a big difference in understanding of this field and how things could operate here versus how we were easily and smoothly operating in Europe. Sarah and I have this mindset of seeing it as opportunities rather than barriers. Not gonna lie, it is pretty difficult time to time, but it also very rewarding, because by pioneering innovation solutions that pushes the boundaries of these conventional modes of thinking, we want to pave the path for other outside of box innovations to actually be able to thrive. Having personally experienced the need to leave the country to access such cool interdisciplinary areas of research, we are very determined to make sure that others won't have to do the same and they can access it here. One other thing that's been also challenging is being a woman in a male-dominated field of clean tech and biotech. It's definitely an aspect that needs more attention and transformation, don't you think?
Definitely. Another aspect, like what the first thing when you said that question, that I just started laughing in my mind so hard, because the understanding of bacteria and like what it can do versus what you think that it does. Like everyone has this negative like idea of bacteria and how it's harmful, it causes disease, it does all this. And even prior to this company, but just even when I was studying my master's, and that's when COVID started. I was in my master's working on a project that was using bacteria to create a material. And from then until even up recently, like Roya was there, we've been asked, oh, like, are you starting the next COVID? Does this, like people don't understand that bacteria do things other that, I mean, COVID's not even bacteria, it's a virus, but that sort of microbial literacy, you can call it, of understanding that bacteria is all around us. It's on our bodies. It's inside us. You can find it at the top of a glacier mountain. You can find it in like the most acidic trenches. It makes our food. It brews beer and wine. It makes us medicine. Like it does everything, and it's involved in every aspect of nature. And there's no respect about that. And I feel like that's a challenge that we've come up across, is like just that understanding of what bacteria is, how it can be safely worked with, and how there's so many amazing things that it does for us that we're just working with it for one amazing thing, but there's endless amazing things that can happen.
That's fascinating. Good to know I hit a chord there. It seems like maybe a lot is obviously misunderstood. Yeah.
A little passionate about that.
Well, the other thing, like very much related, but I wanted to get your take, both of you, on building a hard tech company in Canada. Right now, hard or deep tech, whatever you want to call it, seems to be having a bit of a moment, a little bit more so in the US, but it's a type of company that is very different than a SaaS startup, which I think many investors, that's kind of the framework that they're familiar with. Maybe just turn it over to you. What has your experience been building this company in Canada? Are there things that you think we could be doing more of, things that maybe are, you've had positive experiences with parts of the ecosystem?
Well, we both decided to come to Canada and do it because we saw a huge opportunity of introducing novel pathways for something that we really couldn't point our fingers in Canadian landscape. But I have to say that Canadian clean tech innovation, it's a little bit risk averse, both from industry standpoint as well as resources that are available to young companies that are just starting out as well. And I'm not just talking about investments. I'm talking about lab infrastructures, having access to wet labs in BC, where we are based in, was non-existent in a sense. We absolutely feel that lack of collaborative approach when it comes to innovative solutions between academia, private sectors that are obviously like a lot larger, that they could potentially open their facilities to younger companies and allow them to kind of like have a space to be able to work and thrive from there. But that wasn't really like possible for us. We didn't see that happening. And it's exactly, again, opposite of the experience that we had in Europe. Educational institutions themselves here in BC often are also very difficult to navigate through as well. They hold the IP really strongly and things like that, that as a very young company, it's really difficult to have to agree when you're starting out to have a co-IP or, having everything that you're doing be shared with somebody else, although that is purely just the fruit of your hard work. We have had a lot of conversations with other very innovative deep tech, hard tech companies that they face the same issues. And sadly, at the end of the day, they saw it being a lot easier and smoother to be able to scale such innovations outside of Canada, that they had to leave in order to be able to bring their dreams and what is really possible to reality. I feel like the Canadian investment mindset needs a little bit more of updating. SaaS models are obviously the money makers, the bread and butter of any investment. But at the same time, if you are trying to solve big issues, no big issue is going to be solved over the night. And the concept of a SaaS model, that's just like real quick growth, real quick exits and revenues, and all of those that are required by a lot of investors in Canadian landscape, are not just simply transferable to a biotech, deep tech, clean tech model. We need a little bit more patience capital. In a sense, there's also a very huge gap between early stage companies and investment landscape in Canada, because investors that are allocating their budgets and investment towards clean tech, they often want the companies to be just 2 days before IPO, before they actually invest. But so what happens between early stage and IPO, I think it's a really big mystery in Canadian investment scene that needs to be really redefined and thought about. I understand they aiming and trying to mitigate the risks of investments. And of course, everybody wants profits and everybody wants profit fast, but there is a place and type of business for it. And not every single thing can fit into it. We need different type of solutions right now, and we need them urgently. If you ask me, in order for any of these high potential startups like Lite-1 to get to that growth phase, there is a need for capital, there is a need for support, resources, and such. Otherwise, especially with the very extensive capital-oriented type of like companies that we are, it's not going to be really possible. But at the same time, the rewards and the potential for deep tech is huge.
And I think it's not even like Roy is saying, it's the beginning is really hard for all of those things just mentioned. But when we're talking about biomanufacturing, and once we get to that scaled stage and we're ready to commercially produce this, there's nowhere in Canada right now that we could produce a commercial scale product biomanufactured, like grown from our bacteria. We would have to leave Canada. And so it's hard at the beginning to find those resources. And then, we've managed to do it so far and found some really good partners. We've been lucky in that and worked very hard to secure those. But now what happens once we've, used that grant funding from the Canadian government and used these partners built in Canada, we have to again leave Canada to be able to produce commercially. So it would be amazing to see that explored as well by the country so that we could not only grow here, but then stay here once we have grown and we're, reaping those benefits.
That's fantastic insight. That's interesting, your point about the early stage being a challenge, but then there's almost just not even a challenge, there's a gap. Anything else that you would like to see in the Canadian ecosystem, whether from government, investors, industry partners, hubs, things like that?
What you're seeing right now is, especially in West Coast states area and the deep tech, they're doing such amazing work. Not just like obviously investment aside, like that's being really, really bold. But the other side of it is building this community of all these innovative minds collaboratively working together, share knowledge, and access each other's resources in a really unique way that you don't necessarily feel like you're competing within each other or you're taking away from each other. That's something that you're also missing here too. On another note, there are a lot of like government grants, or pretty much like all the government grants only cover startups works within the Canadian landscape. But it's not necessarily that we want to or we'd like to choose like a different country to collaborate with or like, spend our money on. But it's just simply because they don't really exist here. So we hope for more of those type of collaborations in non-dilutive grants to kind of like introduce us to international scenes of partnerships and collaborations to also take place as well, which is really important.
One other thing, which is like interesting, and I don't know, I'm sure it also, maybe you see that in the States, but like the provincial kind of competitiveness where we, if you look at the funding and resources that are available for areas that we're exactly working on in Ontario or Nova Scotia, it's very different than what's offered here in BC. And in my mind, I would love to see that as more of like a national collaboration and all of us kind of going to boost that bioeconomy across the whole country instead of kind of trying to compete between these different provinces that have different resources that are only available if you live in that province. I understand how it's gotten there, but in my mind, it's so much more exciting to think of Canada as a whole coming together to really push this instead of staying provincial.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've heard that from other folks as well, whether intentionally or not. There's kind of these little pockets emerge where it could be 1 + 1 = 3, but it's just 1 + 1 = 1 in two different places. Maybe if we look ahead to the year ahead, it sounds like there's a lot of incredible things coming down the pipeline for Lite-1 and for this sector. What are you most excited about for the year, and maybe some of your main goals or kind of focus over the coming year?
What I'm most excited about for this year is the sort of curation of our team. We have made really recent hires and everybody is kind of coming together right now. And it's really exciting to think about how over this next year, which is going to be a really big year for us, we will have this team kind of morph into whatever amazing collective that it's going to be. We have so many different voices and incredible expertise, and now getting to see them come together and really shine and work together to push our technology as far as possible. I'm very excited to see that. This year, we're preparing to launch our first colors into the industry. So that's a really big focus, is getting from this scale where we're at now to having some products, our first 2 colors, in the hands of our customers and trying that in their actual systems. Though, yeah, that's what we're working to over this next year. So those are some pretty big milestones that we have coming up.
And that must feel good, both seeing, these milestones and pilot customers coming up, but also having the team we have the right people in place. We have a cohesive team, both people and microbes on the team ready to go. That must just feel,
absolutely
must feel great.
And this team started, just Roya and I, we started in our kitchen working on bacteria projects. Then we found a small collaborative lab that we could access this equipment called the Open Science Network, which allowed us to actually get our hands on some of the equipment that we needed to take it to the next level. And now we have our own lab and office space that is for Lite-1 that's even next level. And all of this has been growing, and now our team members are coming on, and all of them are so passionate and such hold such expertise in the areas that they are experts in. It's turned into something so real from an idea. And that's been a very hard and trying experience, but an incredible experience. And now we're getting to see some real movement in that. So it feels really good.
Yeah. What brings all of our team members together is our mutual love for microbes. And somehow we just keep finding each other.
That's awesome. I've gone through pretty much all the questions that I have, but I'll turn it over to you two. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you think we maybe should have, or something we want to go deeper on?
Yeah. The last thing, which is a perfect conclusion to everything that we've been talking about so far, is, I think it's incredibly important for everyone to take a moment to immerse themselves into the cool systems of nature. It's really mind-blowing to witness the beauty and complexity of the natural world, to realize the endless possibilities for innovation and inspiration that it offers. So, one last advice from my side: stay curious, open-minded, and connect to the world around you.
That is very much aligned with the advice I was going to give, which is to stay curious. And for founders, just giving yourself some room to explore and look to the wider context when you can, which is really hard when you're, so deep in your work. But lately I've been finding that through books that are around the connections of nature and exploration. And so when some of your work can get really heavy and deep into these exact problems, looking out into how we're all connected and exploring that excitement around nature is really important. So I did have a few book recommendations. I know you asked if we had any recommendations on books or podcasts or things, and I'm currently reading this book called The Invention of Nature. It's about Alexander von Humboldt, his life and work. It's by Andrea Wolf, and it's so beautifully written. And it's just all about learning more about Alexander von Humboldt, his explorations, and how deeply he sort of curated our understanding of nature now. And so it was a really energizing book. And he was just such an important mind to Western society when they were kind of in this categorization and looking at everything as an individual in nature. And he was kind of mapping all of the worlds and bringing that together. So that was really cool and has given me a lot of inspiration recently. So
that is one of my favorite books.
Amazing.
Ever, particularly about nature. Yeah, fantastic book.
And can you start a book club?
I would love to start a book club. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
There's a really great magazine by Ginkgo Bioworks called Grow, which is a super beautiful collection of essays and stories and things about people mainly working with microbes or how nature fits into our life. So I would suggest that is really beautiful to get started on your journey of understanding microbes and their impacts.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation, very inspiring, very enlightening. Last thing, where can people find you, and any ask for some of the folks who might be listening to this?
No ask, I would say. Just like I said, stay very curious. And whenever you get a chance, try to tell at least a friend and let it just like spread like that microbes are so fascinating and they are very, very fun to be around. And we are very excited to be able to introduce a new version of colors to the world and a new way of experiencing them. You can find us by emailing us at Roya at light-1.bio and Sarah at light1-bio, or just simply on LinkedIn. That's where we are most responsive.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining us. This is a great conversation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It would mean a lot and helps grow the show. To stay in the loop on Canadian climate tech news, recent fundraising, job postings, events, and more, subscribe to the Climate Tech Canada newsletter on our website. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.